Hi there. In this lecture we join Magnus Carlsen playing against Levon Aronian. This is in the 2007 candidates match. So Aronian Carlsen, okay, round 1.3. We see knight f3 from Magnus, knight f6, c4 b6, g3 c5. So it's an English opening symmetrical variation. So far, knight c3, bishop e7, rook e1, d5, c takes, knight takes d5, d4. Knight takes c3, b takes, bishop e4, knight e5, bishop takes g2, king takes, black castles, e4, queen c8, queen g4. So it's an interesting middle game. Bishop f6, knight f3, king h8. Now we start to see the emergence of a potential dangerous h-pawn, a form pawn as I like to call it. Watch this h-pawn. This is where the area of the excitement of the game for me begins. In particular for this hat theme, the form pawn. So knight c6, bishop g5. This is before the major Alpha Zero games against Stockfish, but it still features a form pawn, and we see how the form pawn can be good in the middle game and end games. So c takes, we have bishop takes f6, g takes, c takes d4, e5, and now queen takes c8, rook takes, rook a takes, d5, knight a5. So black seems to be just getting a very decent position with knight b7 to d6. What could possibly be wrong with this position? Well, the form pawn is on its way, h5. And we actually have knight c4 now being played. This is another route to get to d6. It's a blockade via d6. So if black had played h6, white does have advantage here and is able to get a knight to f5, which is annoying, and black could be broken down. I'll give you an example plan here how black could be broken down. This is just a fictional continuation. White could build on the c file and we could make sure that the king side's rock solid as well. So the king's not going to be doing much on the king side. The king could actually transfer to the queen side, and we could prepare an exchange sacrifice coming up. This position around here, we could play an exchange sac, and then king c4, and then this is huge compensation for the exchange. We've got this fantastic knight now past d pawn, and if black's on the way out, for example, like this, is just one way. So it's understandable, that black doesn't want to tolerate a knight on f5. So we have knight c4, which allows the dreaded form pawn potentially. We have knight h4, knight d6, h6. The form pawn has been installed, and it restricts the king. It's also a good hook on g7 generally if we can switch a rook to that pawn. So be an enthusiast about the form pawns. They can win you so many games, both in the middle game and in end games. And it makes the end game very interesting as a rook and pawn ending goes. Very distinctive flavour to it, in fact, the end games. The king's more restricted than usual. The white king's freer than the black king, and this pawn is just quite dangerous. We see rook c3, and now rook a to c1 is actually a slight inaccuracy, but still strong. In fact, with the full hat on, full blast for the hat for the form pawn enthusiast, knight f5 here is really good. This position, let's say rook c5, rook a to c1. If rook takes d5, rook c7, and black's pieces are pretty restricted, we're doing really well here. So if rook f to c8, we can take on c5, d6, this position, power of the form pawn, restricting the king. Guess what we can play here, which is just crushing. Yeah, the king's in the corner as well. Rook c1 is devastating. We're threatening a back row mate. Rook takes, we're just back row mating. So that's some of the dangers. So let's look at this line again. So the immediate knight f5. Instead of rook c5, if rook d3, rook a to d1, this position, we have a more active king. That king's a bit of a prisoner. Back row issue, so rook takes not possible. Our king's much more active. It makes the rook and pawn endings very distinctive. And here we're threatening g5. Well, we're going to be playing g5 soon to crash through with a very, very aggressive king compared to the black king. So this is like supercharging all of the major goals of, you know, rook and pawn endings. More active king, more active rook, pass pawn potential. So here we've got great pass pawn potential. So even though the pawn pawn's been lost, we're winning in other ways now. So that's really interesting as well. And on e takes f5 here, if rook g8, rook a to c1, say this position, rook e to d1, pair of rooks come off. Yeah, the d pawn's too fast here. It's still going to be a very good position for white. Better king, much more aggressive king. It's going to be an easy win. So knight f5 does seem like really quite convincing here. We have rook a to c1, slight inaccuracy, but white's still got the advantage. So here, this is not maximum resistance. Instead, knight takes e4, but we're still better even here. d6, knight f5, we're still better here. f4, we have an advantage here. But with rook f to c8, pair of rooks come off, knight f5 now. And this is still a golden asset, this pawn pawn here. So knight takes, e takes. So even though we've lost our outpost square, the strength of our own last move, we've vacated e4. So a rook can pivot via e4 to g4. King g8, rook e4. King f8, rook g4. That rook g7 is very powerful. And you can see that the pawn pawn is a potential, you know, dangerous pass pawn if h7 drops. So this position, black's pretty helpless here. Rook takes h7. King g8, rook g7, check, king h8. If king f8, no, we don't play h7 dropping the rook. We just drop the rook back, so h7 is coming. And then we can even sack the rook on g4, we're queening. So we have king h8, d6, rook d7, king f3, b4, king e4, rook takes d6, rook takes f7, rook a6. And now g4, this is still absolutely a winning rook and pawn ending. We have king g8, which is now driven back. How is the king driven back? 5 points. Just h7, we don't need to move our rook. Yeah, the king has to stand guard of h8, otherwise that pawn's queening. g5 now, we're crashing through. F takes, f6. And here black resigned. If rook takes a2, we can play with king f5 and say rook d2, rook e7, b3, f7, threatening f8, queening. If rook takes f2, king g6, and we're back row mating. Black has no chance with this pass pawn. Black gets mated first. So yeah, there's kind of a vivid demonstration of a form pawn here, around here, this h pawn for h6. So this is a very, very powerful concept, which the neural networks emphasized to me much more as well. I even had form pawn t-shirts. So it makes sense to have a hat, put on a hat that, you know, become the form pawn enthusiast, try and explore what it can do for us in these kind of positions. Great stuff. Hope you enjoyed that one. Thanks very much. Hi all, I hope you enjoyed this free Magnus Carlsen lecture. I will be doing quite a few, in fact, because I'm working on a course about universal chess style with a lot of Magnus Carlsen game examples. So I hope you can actually support my channel indirectly by checking out my courses page at Kingscrusher TV. It has great discount codes quite often. So I have a number of courses I've been working on in the last few years. As you can see, I've been busy. Some of these have become Udemy bestsellers in the past or currently, like the Complete Beginner's Guide to Chess is a current bestseller. The Complete Guide to Chess Tactics was previously a Udemy bestseller. So I hope you can check out the courses, and there are free lecture offerings you can check out as well within these. if you really want to get an idea more about the course. You can also expand the course structure when you go and check out a course. So I hope you check out the Kingscrusher TV page, which has these great discount codes attached to all these links. So it's better than going to Udemy directly if you want chess courses, okay, at really affordable prices. So thanks again. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.